The Lord be with you. I'm Todd Townsend, Bishop of Huron. For the next 9 weeks, we're going to be reading our way through the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible. For those of you who follow along the Revised Common Lectionary, my focus isn't always going to be matching perfectly with the readings that are proclaimed on Sunday, but that's okay, because my view of the book is going to be more of an overview. And my hope is that it'll help us interpret the various readings you may encounter through the summer. A few churches are going to use these videos as part of their Sunday morning worship, so I'll start each week in worship mode, and I'll end each video with a quick comment or two about life in our churches and in our world. I may also be able to take the show on the road a bit, and you can guess where I am. I'll end the video with a bit of a look around. Okay, so Genesis. Let's look at these readings for a few things. It's always helpful to have a strategy and to know your strategy for reading the Bible, for reading anything for that matter. Am I reading this for information because I want to be informed? Am I reading this for pleasure? I just want to take my mind off things and escape into this book. Am I reading while looking for ammunition in some sort of battle? I want to find an authoritative word to bolster my views, maybe. Or maybe I'm reading this to find rules for life. I want the Bible to guide me. Maybe I'm reading it because I'm hoping to enter into prayer, and so on. I'm going to read through parts of Genesis this summer looking for God. What is God up to here? What kind of God is revealed in these stories? How does this shape our understanding of God or challenge our understanding of God? Or simply inform us about God in the first place? Do these stories lead us to love God and our neighbor and the world? So let's focus on what God is up to in these narratives and these images. And that's another thing I'm going to choose to do when we read these together, is to focus on the narratives and the stories and the people in them. There's a lot of other stuff in there to see, but I want to look for what images the text provides to us, because narratives and images help us to make meaning of this world. Of course, I'm going to do my homework if I can and look at all what the scholars and teachers have provided for us around the historical aspects, learning from their use of critical methods. We'll drink in all of that, and then we'll focus on God, the narratives, and the images that seem powerful to us. So that's an introduction to the whole summer. Let's launch in with one observation about Genesis as a whole, and one observation about Genesis 1 and 2. Throughout the book of Genesis, God summons two things into existence. God summons the whole world, the whole creation into existence, and God summons a particular people to become God's community. God has formed the world to be God's world, God's cosmos, and God has called a special community in this world to be God's people. And there's a mutual faithfulness embedded in this summons and response. And stories about how this mutual faithfulness plays out or doesn't play out, because it's full of ups and downs, as you know. But one thing's always central: when God summons something into being, it comes with a promise from God. And it's the whole story is a story of how God keeps God's promises. As Walter Brueggemann has taught for so long, the substance of the call in Genesis is the promise. The promise is the theological focus of it all. So it is a Genesis, this book. It's a beginning. It's about the new beginning for the world and the creatures of God. And frankly, I'm eager to hear again in the middle of this global pandemic about new beginnings. So that's a word about Genesis as a whole. And this is about the first two chapters. The first, in the beginning, it starts. In the beginning, when God created, when God began to create the earth and the heavens, it was a formless void, darkness, deep nothingness, while a wind of God swept over the face of the waters. There was nothing there except God, the wind of God, and the face of the waters. Now there's an image for you. And then into this nothingness, God spoke. God didn't wave God's hands over anything. God didn't do a backflip and then shazam, blast everything into being. No, God spoke, and God's voice reverberated and resonated and came into harmony with God's own deepest desires, and light. There was light. And God saw that it was good. And so God spoke into being the next creatures, day and night, until on the seventh day God rested in Sabbath. It all culminates in Sabbath. You and me and everything that exists culminates in God's Sabbath. So there is this 7-day story which we'll come back to from time to time. And then there is another creation story in the beginning of the second chapter. It's a bit older maybe. It offers images, lots of different images of God in creation. The second account begins like this. In the day of the Lord, the beginning is clearly the Lord's day. God made the earth and the heavens before there were any plants in the field, no herbs or anything else had sprung up, for God had not yet caused it to rain. And there was no one there to till the ground. It's a different image of what God saw as lacking, indicating what God wanted to create. There was just dryness, dry earth. Whatever would be there before soil, maybe dust, just carbon dust, stardust, nothing dust. So God made a stream to rise up from the earth, and there's that water again. Except it didn't come from somewhere else. It rises up from within the earth, and the water covered the whole face of the ground. Another image. Dust with water coming up from within to mix on the ground so that God can reach down into the moistened dust. God can reach down into the mud and the clay and scoop it up and breathe life into the human so that it becomes a living, breathing creature. And then God the gardener plants a garden in Eden and hosted the human there. And it was full of trees and plants and everything that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. And a river, it says, flows out of Eden to water the garden. And the Lord said to the human, "Eat freely while you tend and till my garden." What is God doing? What kind of God does this beautiful work of creation? What do these narratives provide for us in images that remain with us? Will these resonate with your experiences? Does it resonate with God's creative voice in all parts of your life and with other parts of Scripture and with our worship? And most importantly, with our lives right now. I look forward to continuing into the book of Genesis with you next week and in the weeks to follow. Peace be with you. Okay, if you've stayed till the end of the video, I'm going to walk around here so you can see where I am. I know some of you will have guessed this already. You will have guessed, right? That, whoops, losing control. There we are, St. Paul's Cathedral. May God go with us.